Hi there, good morning. Welcome to the ScorePoint online webinar. This is for training. I can see some of you out there, you've already done ScorePoint for the past two administrations, so it might be a refresher. So a reminder, not much has changed in ScorePoint for this new scoring season. And for those of you that are new, if you have any questions, please do use the questions feature on the right of the screen to send a question to Questar and NICEAD colleagues. The presentation is posted online on CBT support, so you can follow along. The presentation that is online, it does include the workshop slides that are covered on in the on-site training. We will not be doing a workshop today. You won't get experience with scoring, but if you need more details, you can always follow up with us later. We can certainly walk you through the preview site, which I believe is open until Thursday this week. Is that correct, Helene?
That is correct.
Okay. All right, so this is the CBT ScorePoint webinar. All constructed responses that are scored by students, that are entered by students on computer, are scored on Questar's ScorePoint platform. This is a web-based platform that allows the scoring director to set up scoring windows, to enter her scores, to provide login tickets, see reports. It's an easy platform to use. We know this because every scoring consortia in the state reported last year that it cut their scoring time in half. That's a big difference between paper and computer. And we also think that it's lower stress for the scorers. These are things that we hear. And we think that the scorers are happier. And I think that's something we all want throughout the state, is we want scorers to be happy, comfortable, and relaxed when they're scoring our students' constructed responses. This year, there are more than 30 different local scoring consortia throughout the state. The scoring consortia is comprised of at least 3 different schools that have agreed to come together and score student responses entered on computer. Additionally, there are 5 scoring vendors that work in New York State and also provide services to schools for CBT scoring. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Helene Gnyatek from Questar, who is going to lead the training today. Right. Thanks, Helene.
Great. Thanks, Heather. Good morning, everyone. As Heather mentioned, we're here today to talk about ScorePoint. We're going to do some training. The presentation, the slide that you see now, the presentation is out on CBT support here. Today's agenda, we're going to go through roles and responsibilities. There are 3 roles in ScorePoint. We're going to talk about all 3 of those and what each of those roles does in ScorePoint, what you will work through ScorePoint based on your role, and we'll walk through those. Then we're going to actually get into ScorePoint, talk about readers and team leaders and scoring directors. There are some reports in ScorePoint that we highly recommend that you use, and we'll go through those as well. And then we'll finish up today talking about how to finish the project, how to make sure that you have scored all your responses and you are truly done with scoring for your content area for this year. So ScorePoint is the engine you will use to score the CBT CR items, so the constructed response items that your students will take. You will still receive a scoring CD. For ELA, you should receive it to your district by April 2nd. For math, it is May 1st. That scoring CD has all the scoring materials, the scoring leader handbook and all the sample responses. So the same CD that you usually get when you score paper, you'll get this for CBT as well. You will train your readers the same way you have in the past how to score these items. You will also then train your readers on how to use ScorePoint. So there is an extra step in there for training. They need to know how to use the ScorePoint system. But the actual training on how to score responses remains the same, and the CD that you'll receive on April 2nd will have all that information that you need. So how does ScorePoint and Nextera work together? So beginning on Friday, we will send the scoring directors their username and password into ScorePoint. And starting on Friday, those scoring directors can create the login tickets. We'll show you how to do that. They set up their windows. They prepare for scoring. If you are also the school test coordinator or the district test coordinator for CBT, you're already in admin now. You're in the Nextera admin. You're preparing for testing to start on April 1st. So you're printing login tickets for the students, you're adding accommodations for the students, and you've already had access into admin to do that. Starting on April 1st, the ELA window opens and students will start testing in the Nextera test delivery system, the TDS. So as the students are testing, then starting on April 1st, nightly, Questar is pulling those responses from Nextera. So the students log in, they take their test, they hit submit. We pull those responses from the student. We put them in Nextera starting on April 4th. Then we're transferring that from Nextera system into ScorePoint. And we're doing that on a nightly load process through the entire ELA testing window. So we're doing it from April 4th to April 11th, and then again we turn around and do the same thing for math during the math window. So we're loading responses into ScorePoint, and we're putting them in the buckets based on your consortia. So you've already identified your consortia and what schools are in your consortia, and we are putting those responses in those buckets. Then starting on April 5th for ELA, that's when scoring begins. Readers, as part of your consortia, can score those responses from students, and all that happens. And we'll talk what happens during the scoring window today. So we'll spend a lot of time here. And then as you are scoring, we are then extracting those constructed response scores out of ScorePoint, and we're getting those ready back into Nextera. We're getting those ready to send data files back to the state for reporting. So it's basically a back and forth process. The ScorePoint application, it's an online platform. So the link to ScorePoint, it's on one of the next slides coming up. But it's just a website that you'll go. Scoring directors will be sent their user ID and their temporary password. And then scoring directors will create the logins for readers and team leaders. There's no installation required. You must use Google Chrome. That's the one requirement. But it's just a website. So you can bookmark the website on the devices that you'll be using for scoring. All of the same paper-based activities that you've used in the past for scoring your 2, 3, and 4-point questions will be the same for scoring CBT. So you're scoring responses, you're marking that non-tested or non-score code for students who leave a response blank. Any issues with concerns, and we'll talk about those, disturbing content and harm to self, those alerts, we'll talk about that. In ScorePoint, you're also performing the read behinds. So your table leaders, your team leaders will do those read behinds as well. Same process that you do for paper-based scoring, you're going to use for computer-based scoring. these dates should look very familiar to you. You know by now when your testing dates are. For ScorePoint, again, we're going to provide access to scoring directors starting on March 22nd for ELA. And then the scoring dates, April 5th through the 17th, and therefore the ScorePoint window is the same, April 5th through the 17th. And then the math dates down here. You're going to score May 6th through the 16th, and therefore ScorePoint is open during those times as well. Just as a reminder, this is a rule regardless of whether you're scoring on paper or you're scoring through ScorePoint. A teacher may not begin to train for scoring or even start scoring until the primary administration of that grade level has been administered within that teacher's school. So they can't train on scoring, they can't start scoring until you've completed your primary administration in your building or in that teacher's building. That's a rule regardless of how you're scoring, paper or on computer. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the naming conventions for our roles. I use them interchangeably during the training, but I want to make sure that everyone understands that in the paper world, you probably called them scorers. In ScorePoint, we actually call them readers. So I'll go back and forth using those terms. The team leader in ScorePoint, you may know them as a table facilitator or a table leader. It's the same role. And then our scoring director, naming convention in ScorePoint, you might know that person as the scoring leader, the scoring site coordinator, same person, same role. We just use these terms within ScorePoint. So let's talk about what a reader will do in ScorePoint. Well, the reader's primary focus will be to score student responses. If there are any alerts as that reader is going through responses, they will mark them. We'll show you how to do that today. And then any responses that the reader is just not sure how to score, so the unable to score. I need someone else to talk to about this response, got some questions. We'll show you the reader how to mark those responses in ScorePoint. And then the non-score code for those blank responses. So basically the reader, 4 easy things they have to do. The bulk of their work will be scoring responses. Team leader responsibilities. Team leaders will get the login tickets for readers. They'll receive those from the scoring director. So team leaders can distribute those login tickets to readers. They're monitoring the progress of scoring. They're doing the read behinds from the readers. We'll talk about the released reserved responses in just a couple minutes. And then any alerts that the reader has identified, the team leader can handle those and manage those within ScorePoint. As a scoring director, it is your responsibility to train the team leaders and the readers on how to use ScorePoint. You're also training them on the scoring process, right? So how to score the ELA constructed response items. But you have another step in that you're training them how to use ScorePoint as well. The Scoring Leader Handbook is available, and that for this year, and you have to follow all the policies and procedures in that handbook. So regardless of paper or computer, the policies and procedures are the same for scoring. Scoring directors will request logins, will print those login tickets. They're also setting up the days and times for scoring, those scoring windows. We'll show you how to do that today. As a scoring director, you will have the ability to monitor the progress of scoring for readers, for the read behind that the table leaders, the team leaders are doing. You'll have access to monitor that, and we'll show you some reports that will help you with that. And then any alerts that come in from readers, you will have the ability to see those, to manage those. And then we'll show you towards the end the reports that that are available in ScorePoint that you can use to manage the scoring window. So some security recommendations for using ScorePoint. So please work with your local IT staff to make sure that you have a secure scoring environment, that it is set up and ready for when the readers begin their work. You want to whitelist the URL, and here's the website right here for the ScorePoint. We ask you to block access to other websites. Again, ScorePoint is a website. Readers are just going to use this website. They're going to open up their device, turn it on, and go to this link. Unlike the student test delivery system, where when the students log in to the TDS, it basically locks down everything else, right? Once the student is in that TDS, they can't get to anything else. They can't alt-tab out to the internet. They can't do anything. Well, ScorePoint is a website. There is no secure security lockdown when you're in ScorePoint. So you need to work with your IT staff to make sure that, can you set up devices so that you lock these things down? At the same time, you need to train your scorers to know that they're on ScorePoint, they stay in ScorePoint, they don't need to be, tabbing out to do anything else, to look at anything else. They're in ScorePoint, they stay in ScorePoint. Printing from devices or devices that have photographic capabilities. So if you can do screenshots on the device, we strongly encourage you to turn that ability off. Turn the ability off to print from the devices that the readers are using. So again, just like scoring paper, you don't want scorers to be able to take a picture with their phone or screen print something they see on the screen. That is not allowed. So make sure you set up the room and devices so that all of those things are turned off. And then at any time, if a scorer is stepping away from their device, going to lunch, taking a break, whatever it is, make sure that the devices are locked with passwords. We strongly recommend that anytime a scorer or anyone steps away from the device, that they log out of ScorePoint. They can use their username and password to get back in. It's very easy. So anytime they step away, they need to log out and then come back in. These system requirements haven't changed since last year. I already mentioned you have to use Google Chrome. That's probably the #1 requirement that you need to be aware of. So we have some recommendations here for setting up your system. You can use Windows, Macs, and Chromebooks. So we do not support iPads for scoring. Students can use iPads during testing, but for scoring using ScorePoint, you can use Windows, Macs, or Chromebooks. And they have to have Google Chrome. You're going to access ScorePoint via Google Chrome. Okay. Let's talk about what you do as a reader. So readers will receive their login tickets from the team leaders or the scoring director. Scoring director is the person, the role that can print login tickets in ScorePoint. So the scoring director can give the team leaders logins to distribute to readers, or the scoring director can do that. That's a local decision. You can decide that. But the readers will receive their login information from either a team leader or scoring director. And here you'll see some information on the left side of the ticket. So this is the actual ticket, the login information credentials that the reader will see. The user ID, the password, and then just roll, confirming that they are set up as a reader. And then the school beds code, the school name, the scoring group. The scoring group are those groups that NYSED has already determined those set of items that are in the group. So these are in the scoring leader handbook, and NYSED may have said ELA questions 1, 3, and 5 are in this group, and ELA questions 2, 4, and 6 are in this group. So they've already identified what groups the items are in. This ticket just identifies what group this login will have. And then within that group, there'll be multiple items, right? 1, 3, and 5, or 2, 4, and 6, however NYSED has determined that. And then the team name, so the grouping within ScorePoint. So that's what the login ticket looks like. They'll receive, the team leaders, scoring directors will give those to readers. Once readers use that ticket to log in, the very first thing they need to do is, it's a temporary password. They have to change that password. Once they change that password, this verification box is going to pop up. At this point, the reader is going to add their first name and last name. This then ties their name to this login. So now within ScorePoint, once they click on Save, now within ScorePoint, this reader's name is now tied to this login. Verify their reader, their school name, group name, team name. This will be the same process that team leaders will use to log in as well. So their login tickets will look very similar. Their login role will be a New York team leader, not a reader. But they'll go through the same process. They have to change that temporary password, and they have to add their first and last name. Once they click on Save, then they're in the ScorePoint application. So let's talk about what readers see in ScorePoint. This is the main page for a reader. They actually won't see these three options right here. The only option that a reader sees is score responses. So on the main page, when the reader logs in, they'll click under performance scoring, and then they'll click on score responses. What then happens is, again, this login is tied to a specific grade and a specific group of items. So within that group, there may be multiple items, right, that have been assigned to this grouping, this score grouping. So here the reader will click on the item drop down and choose which item they want to score. So you've already predetermined as team leaders and scoring directors, we're scoring, item number 1 today, or we're going to do 1 in the morning, we're going to do 3 in the afternoon, whatever it is. So you've determined what items they're going to score, so you are leading them through this, and the readers will already know that. They'll know which item to go to. Once they select their item, they're going to click on Score Select Item. And from there, it takes the reader directly into the first response that the reader will score. So in the middle here, you will see it's basically the CR box. It is exactly what the student typed in to a CR box. You'll notice there's no framework around it. The question is not identified. It is strictly just the response that the student typed in. Over here on the right, you'll see all the actions that the reader will take, and we'll walk through every one of those today. Up here, this response ID at the very top, the item name is identified. So this reader is scoring grade 4 math item 8. And the response ID. The response ID is the only identifier for this response. This is unique to every response that's in ScorePoint. The response ID is tied to the student's NYSIS ID. So in ScorePoint, you'll never see student identifying information. You'll never see a student name, a student NYSIS ID. This response ID is tied back to that NYSIS ID on the back end, but as a reader, you won't see any of that information, any student information. The response ID is unique to each response. So see this display item checkbox right here? If you click on that at any time while you're scoring as a reader, it is going to display the item template. So now you will see exactly what the student sees when he's testing. So this is the question. You can see the student responded within the CR boxes now, and you'll see the whole framework of the question. The default for all readers, every time they score an item and move on, will be this sort of clean version without the formatting, without the question around it. Readers are always able to click on that display item checkbox to get that full layout of the question. What we have found is that most scorers may use this view, this entire view of the question, a few times as they get started scoring. But then once they're, in 10 responses, 20 responses, they now have the framework in their head and they don't need all of this as they're scoring. So they'll probably use it in the beginning, or if a response comes up that maybe they need to refresh, what exactly did that layout look like? That question look like, they can click on display item, get that format again, score it, and move on. So it's always there and available to readers. So now as the reader is moving through, they see the response. They will put their score in the box. So this happens to be a 4-point item. They have 5 choices, 0 through 4. If it's a 2-point item, they'll have just 0, 1, or 2. Okay. They just click the score that they want to give this response, and they will move on. Submit and get next. Submit and get next means I submit this score for this response and I want to score another. So the majority of the time that readers are scoring, they're going to submit and get next. It just presents the next response to them for that question, and they just continue to score. They're now scoring grade 4 ELA item 7s. Right up here you can see. I'm going to give it a 3, submit and get next. It presents the next response. Submit and exit would be used if I want to score this response. I give it a 3, but I need to take a break. I need to go to lunch. Submit and exit will submit that score for that response and then take the reader back to the main home page, where they would then log off, go to break, go to lunch, come back and continue scoring. Log back in, continue scoring. So submit and exit takes them back to that main page. Cancel and exit, on the other hand, does not submit a score. Cancel and exit, you know what, I didn't have time to really think about this response. Everybody is leaving for lunch. They want to close down the room. I don't have time to score this. When I click cancel and exit, I am putting this response back in the queue for somebody else to score. I may have looked at it, but I've decided I don't have time to really spend reading through it and making sure I know what score to give it before we break for lunch or we have to go home. So I'm going to cancel and exit, puts that response back in the queue for someone else, takes me as a reader back to that home page. At any time, if you choose a score or you chose incorrectly a non-score code of A and you don't want that score, you can always use the clear score button up here. That will just clear whatever you indicated here in the score or the non-score code area. Non-score codes, we call it non-score codes, but there's one code and it's A. And the only time you use the non-score code of A is if the student has a blank CR box. So they typed nothing in the CR box. It is completely blank. That is an A. So you would just code that A. Don't give it a score, right? There's no score. It's just an A. And then again, submit and get next. You would submit an exit or you cancel an exit. So you just choose one of these and move on. This is the student's response in the middle. And for whatever reason, I'm just not clear as a reader what I should give this student. I think I need to talk to someone. It looks like maybe it's a 1, it might be a 2. I'm just not clear. I want to talk to my team leader. You can use, as a reader, you can click on Unable to Score. Unable to Score then sends this response to the team leader's queue. At that point, the score reader can raise his hand or get up and walk over to the team leader and say, I just sent you a response. I want to talk about it. At this point, the reader, before he clicks on Unable to Score, if they're not sure, they can always jot down the response ID if that will help, or remember some aspect of the response. You click on Unable to Score, then that immediately shows up in the team leader's queue. At that point, the reader and the team leader can discuss, and then the reader and team leader can discuss the score and then just continue with the process. They can then score and move on. But this Unable to Score takes that response and drops it into the team leader's queue so that they can discuss it. So we just talked about this. Readers mark it as Unable to Score. Team leader would locate that response in the reserve response queue. I'll show you where that is in just a minute. And then the team leader would finish scoring this response. So it's just an electronic way of the paper version of raising your hand when you have a question, right? So as scorers, readers, in the past, if you had a question about a response and how to score it, you may raise your hand or get up and walk over to the team leader. This is just the electronic way. When you click on Unable to Score, it just drops that response in the team leader's bucket, and then you can have that conversation. As a reader, as I'm scoring responses, what you can see on the main page before you choose your item and get into those responses to start scoring is you see this reserved response queue here. Reserved responses for a reader would happen for 2 reasons, and I'll talk about them in a minute. But as a reader, you always want to make sure that you're cleaning up these reserved responses. So as a reader, if you ever see any reserved responses in here, before the end of the day, before you go to lunch, you want to make sure that these are taken care of. So in order to score a reserved response, again, you're on the Score Response tab. You would just click on this item and then click on Score Reserve Responses. It's going to pop up looking the same way as all the other responses, right? So you're going to see the response, you're going to score it, and then move on. Let's talk about why they end up in reserve response queue as a reader. As the reader, if you are scoring and for whatever reason, instead of clicking on submit and exit, so you're at a response, instead of clicking on submit exit, that would take you back to the main page, you forget and you use your browser back button, right? The one at the very top on your browser in Chrome. Well, basically, you didn't give me a score for that response. You used your browser back button, which didn't save the response, but the response is checked out to that reader. It is identified saying that reader is going to score the response. Well, you used your browser back button and I didn't capture the response. So I've put it in your reserve response queue. Another way this happens is the reader is on the page looking at the response, and instead of clicking on submit and get next or submit and exit, they come over here and they click on score responses. Well, again, you haven't told me what you want to do with that response. You haven't told me what you're giving that response as a score. So that response is still tied to the reader. They haven't scored it yet. They clicked another button, maybe on the left side here. Again, they use that the internet browser back button. So those items are going to sit in the reserve responses. They're checked out to that reader. I've tied those responses to that reader. I need the reader to finish scoring. So we've just talked about this. You use your browser back button. It will put that response in the reserve queue. And if you choose one of the other menu options, it'll put them in the reserve response queue. As readers, you need to clean those up. You need to click on them, score them, and move on. Okay. Just as an FYI, if you, as a reader, are scoring your reserved responses, so you've clicked on that reserved response here, the response is opened. Once you finish scoring that response, if you click on submit and get next, it's actually going to just put you right back in the queue, the big bucket of responses. It's not sending you to the next reserved response. So if you score that reserved response, click on submit and get next, it's actually putting you in the queue again. And you're just scoring just responses that are out there and available. So if you want to clean up reserved responses, you would submit and exit. That takes you back to that main home page. You can see whatever reserved responses are still in your queue. And then you can, close out for the day or whatever, you need to do for the day as a reader. So best practice as a reader, you should have them score, and then maybe before lunch, maybe 30 minutes before lunch, you remind them, maybe 30 minutes before the end of the day, remind them, look at your reserved response queue. Make sure you don't have anything in there. If you do, choose those items, score them, get them done before we break for lunch, before we break to go home for the day. As a reader, when you get to the end of all responses for that item, you will see a message that pops up that says all available responses have been scored. Check reserve bin for remaining responses. So we just talked about how to check your reserve response bin. But you'll get this message when all the responses have been scored. So you've been just working through the bucket of all the responses for that item. And I expect that readers will come across this. They will have scored everything, right? You'll get to the end. We recommend that you attempt to select the item one more time. Make sure you get this warning. Make sure that you've verified your reserved response queue is empty, and then you truly have scored all of the responses for that item. Now remember, the testing window is open while you're starting to score. So you may get this message that says all the available responses have been scored. You may get that today, but if you still have students testing, you may have more responses tomorrow or the next day, right? So as the testing window is still open, every night we are pulling responses from Nextera and dropping them into your ScorePoint bucket, your consortia. If the testing window is still open, I'm pulling those nightly. So today, if you get this message that you've scored everything, doesn't mean that tomorrow you're not going to have responses available for scoring. Until that testing window is closed and we've taken everything out of Nextera and dropped it into ScorePoint, you may have more responses every day. And so you'll need to plan for that, and you'll need to plan to have readers available to continue scoring. Okay, let's talk about alerts. So as a reader, I am reading responses. I'm submitting and getting next. I'm moving through. I'm looking at those responses. All is good. As a reader, I come across a response that has an issue. It may have disturbing content. It may mention something about harming myself or someone else. Those are alerts, and you need to flag those in ScorePoint. So the process and what an alert response would be, all of that normal process and how you handle that, that is in the Scoring Leaders Handbook. That's the normal process, whether it's paper or CBT. In ScorePoint, for CBT constructed responses, if you come across a response that needs to be alerted, what you will do is you will still score the response. You have to give it a score. Actually, ScorePoint will not let you move off this page until you give it a score. You score it, and then down at the bottom, you will see the alert reason, the drop-down box. The drop-down box has two choices: disturbing content or harm to self or others. You would choose the reason and then add in the comment section exactly where you want someone to look. Please do not put any identifying information in this comment section. There are reports that scoring directors can run that show the comment text that you put in here. We don't want any identifying information in that comment field. So as a reader, you want to put exactly what you want someone to see. Look at paragraph 3, line 4. Read the first paragraph. Something that identifies this is where I want you to look, but it doesn't have any details in it. So you would choose the alert reason, type in the comment where you want the scoring director, team leader to look, and then you're going to just submit and get next, submit and exit, or cancel. Submit and exit or submit and get next. Cancel and exit is not scoring it, so you're not saving the alert. Okay. So you just choose the button and you move on. As a reader, when you mark the alert, that goes directly to an email that the scoring director will receive. So the scoring director gets something like this in an email immediately that says, for the harm to self and others, there was a response that was coded, harm to self and others. Please go into ScorePoint and look into it. So it's basically just a heads up to the scoring director. Coding a response to disturbing content does not create this email. It is strictly the harm to self and others that flags this, and an email is generated. So again, not a lot of identifying information in the email that's generated, but we'll show you in a little bit where the report is that scoring directors will use that has that information and your comments in it. So that's how you set alerts as a reader. We've gone through how to score, how to code the not tested code, how to flag an alert for someone else to look at, how to complete your reserved response items and how to get those out of the queue. So we walk through everything that a reader will do. At this point, we're going to go in and start talking about team leaders and what their responsibilities will be in ScorePoint. As a team leader, you have access in ScorePoint to do a few additional pieces. Team leaders can score. They have in their login that they receive, they can score responses. So they have that ability. They will see, and the number 1 is right over it, but they will see the ability to click on score responses and score within their login. Team leaders are responsible for handling alerts. So they will see, if they click on alerts, they will see all of the alerts that have been created to date. And then you'll see this alert status here. If you click on that, you will see the details of the alert. You will see the response that the student typed in, and then you will see the alert reason. So these are the things that the reader created when they created the alert. They identified the reason, disturbing content or harm to self or others, the date that it was created, and then the comment. So this is the actual comment field that the reader used to type in, look at paragraph 1, line 3. The alert status is just an electronic way to keep the status of all the alerts. By the end of the scoring window, you should have them all closed or coded as not an alert. But this is just a way for you to keep the status in ScorePoint so that you can see at an easy glance where they are in the process. So you would choose, the alert, I've taken action, I've contacted the principal, waiting for principal to get back to me, whatever the process is that you've used, sort of that step-by-step process to identify the alert, who needs to know about it, how you're going to contact that person, those types of things. So that's all outside of ScorePoint, but what you can do is just keep the status of that alert here. And then you're just going to click on Save Alert, and then that saves the new updated status. In ScorePoint, the scoring director can run the alert problem sheet with images, which they choose the date range. They can run the report by the different status if they want to. They can only run those alerts that are open or have a status of closed, whatever. If they choose all, it's going to run all of them. When they run the report, the first page that they will see is sort of this cover page. It has reader information, it has the item information. What you'll see now, and the only time you see any student information, is on this alert report. You'll see the actual student ID, so you'll see the nicest ID. This is a sample, so you don't see it here. And then the student name. That is the only place, only time in ScorePoint that student name and nicest ID are identified in ScorePoint. So it gives you identifying information. It identifies the alert. The second page is actually the student response. So you'll see the actual text from the CR box that the student typed in. And this report will run this way. So you'll get a cover page, next page is a student response. And then the next alert will have the cover page and the student response. So it will open 20 pages, cover page response, and you'll see that for all the alerts that you've indicated you want to see with this report. This is the type of information you can print it out, you can provide to the principal, has the student information, has the student response, provide this to the principal or whoever's going to handle the follow-up on the alert. So this report will show both disturbing content and harm to self or others. The next role or the next requirement that team leaders have will be to do read behinds. So when a team leader logs in, they would click under performance scoring and then click on the New York read behind, and the team leader will see this main page here. The next step, they're going to choose their grade, their item. You are doing read behind the same day. So you are reading behind responses that readers are scoring today. You choose either by staff number, if you know the number that we've created for that reader, or you can also select the staff by name, which I expect most of you will probably do that. So when you click on this, it's going to give you a drop down of all of the readers that have scored today. Then you're going to see all the responses that the reader has scored. If you click on this number, the R1 staff number, if you click on any of these, it's actually going to pull up the response and you will do the read behind there. So let's talk about, as a team leader, how you do read behinds. So when you click on that response ID, it's going to open up and it looks very similar to what a reader sees. You'll see the response in the middle, and then your actions are over here on the right. When you're doing read behinds, if you agree with the reader's score, reader gave it a 2, and you would see in the read behind, you would see the score. It would be identified. If you agree with the reader's score, reader gave it a 1, I think it should be a 1. All I do is submit and exit. That has identified, there's been a read behind, the team leader agrees with the score, and we move on. So the agreement is submit and exit. So this is what we just talked about. If you agree with the reader's score, you don't have to talk to the reader. There's no conversation. You submit and exit, and you move on. Let's go back. See this update reader score button? Remember that. And let's talk about what happens if you're doing read behinds and you don't agree with the reader score. The reader gave it a 1 and you really think it should be a 3. I think that the reader just missed this very important piece and I think it should be a 3. At that point, you have the response up on your screen. And at this point, you are going to consult with the reader and explain why you think it should be a 3. You gave this a 1, but because of this, this, and this, I think it should be a 3. If the reader agrees with you and the reader agrees to change the score, that's when you have the reader on your device select the new score, so choose the 3, and then the reader will click Update Reader Score on that page. Once they click on Update Reader Score, there's going to be a pop-up that asks them, the reader, to enter their password. Their password is that password that got them into ScorePoint. So it's the same password. So this is what happens when a reader and a team leader do not agree at first. Reader gave it a 1, team leader gave it a 3. But after consultation, you've talked about it and the reader says, you're right, I didn't see that, it should be a 3. The reader on your device, on the team leader's device, is going to click the new score, click Update Reader Score, put in their password. That now has logged that the reader originally gave it a 1, that there has been some conversation. They have decided, the reader and team leader, the reader has decided to update the score. They've updated the score. They clicked on Update Reader Score. We have all that saved. What happens if you're doing read behinds as a team leader? The reader gave it a 1 and you think it should be a 3. Well, you bring that reader up to talk about possibly changing the score. I just feel like it should be a 3 because of this, this, and this. And the reader, as much as the conversation goes, the reader just disagrees. The reader is adamant that is not in that response. I do not think the student warrants a 3. I do believe it should be a 1. So what you're going to do at that point, you change the score on the page, on the screen, but you do not click Update Reader Score. You just click Submit and Exit. So the team leader is changing the score and clicking Submit and Exit. Again, this logs that there was a disagreement. This logs that the reader still disagrees with the team leader. We've captured both of those scores, but the reader's score is the one that is reported. And that is the policy rule, regardless of paper or computer. The reader's score is what is reported. Now, more times than not, this is more of a training issue that will happen back when you have that original conversation between a reader and a team leader. And the reader agrees, oh, you're right, I didn't understand that, I didn't see that. At that point, there probably is more, there'll be additional scoring training because the reader missed something, right? At this point, the disagreement It has to be recorded, but you've probably done additional scoring training. You've seen that this reader needs some help, and you open up that scoring training and maybe stop the whole group and talk about some examples and additional things to look at in their students' response. But if there is a disagreement, you update you change the score and you click on submit and exit. In all three of those examples, we talked about when the reader gives it a 1 and you as a team leader think it should be a 3. Because the policy is that team leaders don't question fence sitters. And a fence sitter is that difference between a 1 and a 2. Again, a fence sitter, you would, after you have the conversation with the reader, you would still change the score. You're clicking submit and exit. So you're recording that there's a disagreement. You're recording the score that the team leader thinks it should be. And again, this is another example of more training is probably needed for this reader. And if it's needed for this reader, it's probably needed for other readers as well. So fence sitter is that difference between a 1 and a 2 and a 3. There's probably more scoring that needs to happen. Stop the group, talk about some examples, share how that response should be scored based on the rubric and the examples that are given in the scoring materials. So those are the read behinds and how to handle those differences as the team leader is going through read behinds. There is a read behind report that scoring directors can use. This just, when you run this report in ScorePoint, it just gives the information. It's by reader, so you can see the reader. And then how the read behinds are going. So some information about how many of those readers' responses were read behind, how many were accepted, how many were disagreed. So it gives you some information. This is a good report to run as a scoring director, throughout the window, throughout the day to see how things are going. Just as a scoring director, you can monitor it through this report. You can monitor as you're discussing with your team leaders. Just another way to look at the information. So those are the roles or the tasks of the team leader role. Now let's talk about what a scoring director will do. A scoring director will receive their credentials from Questar, from me, on Friday. I'm going to send an email to all scoring directors that we have on file, and we've already determined that. You've received information from me already. We've confirmed that you have your schools and your consortia. I know who the scoring directors are. So on Friday, when we're ready, we'll send an email. It will have your user ID and your temporary password. As always, you use your temporary password. You have to change it to a new one. There are some requirements there on the screen. Scoring directors, if you misplace your password, which you won't because it's secure and you're going to keep track of it. But if you do or you forget your password, you can call Questar customer service and we can reset a scoring director password. For readers or team leaders, if they forget their password, you would just give them a new login. So remember, those logins are generic until the reader or team leader log in and tie their name to it, put their first name and last name. So they're generic. If a reader or team leader loses their password, forgets it, you just give them a new login ticket. You don't have to call Questar because we're going to tell you to just print a new login ticket and give it to the reader. There are a couple things, steps, tasks that scoring directors should do preparing for scoring and then during scoring. The very first thing scoring directors should do is run the project setup report in ScorePoint. This project setup report shows you the schools that are in your consortia. Remember, I've been working with you as scoring directors to verify that we have the correct schools in your consortia. But please make sure you run this project setup report within the next week. I'm going to give you access on Friday, but within the next week, please run this report and make sure that you have the schools listed on this report. If you have a missing school, call us immediately. This report shows you what schools are going to be included in your bucket for scoring. And if we don't have it right, then you're not going to see the school's responses. So you have to run this report before scoring starts. And please do it before testing starts, because once testing starts and we start moving responses from Nextera to ScorePoint, we're moving them based on what schools are in your consortia. If that school isn't in your bucket, you're not getting those responses. And to do it after testing has started and we've started moving responses is a bigger deal than if we can do it before testing starts. So please, please, please run this report, verify your schools are here. It also gives you the item groups, okay? So we talked about what item group or items would be in specific groups. It gives you that information. So it's basically from the Scoring Leader Handbook, but you can see it here on this report as well. So that's your first step. You're going to run that project setup report. The next step as a scoring director, you're going to set up your scoring windows. You can have a scoring window and a read behind window. You can have multiple windows. Basically, you are telling ScorePoint when it will be available for scoring and read behinds. This is a security measure. We want you to set this up so that ScorePoint is only available to your users when you are going to score or when you are going to do read behinds. So please, for security reasons, don't set up a scoring window that's Monday through Sunday from 12:01 to 11:59. You're basically opening up ScorePoint for the entire window. And for security reasons, that's not best practice. Think about when you're going to have scorers come in, readers come in to score. We're going to score Monday through Friday from 8 to noon. That's our plan. Now, I want you to be as strict as possible with your windows, but you also want to give a little bit of leeway as well. If your plan is to score from 8 a.m. till noon every day, I would set it up from maybe 7:45 a.m. to 12:30. That way, if people come in early, they're ready to go, you can start scoring at 7:45. That way, you say you're going to end at noon, but you know what? You got just a handful more responses and a couple of nice teachers have decided that they will stay a little longer just to finish out today. Well, your window's already open till 12:30. You're set. They can score till 12:30, finish up whatever in the queue, and be done for today. So manage those windows as tightly as possible, but give yourself some flexibility as well. Because once the window, your created scoring window closes, then they're on 15-minute intervals and you have to wait 15 minutes to create a new one And then you've got scorer readers who are not scoring. They're just sitting around waiting for the window to reopen. So keep that in mind. They can be set up on the day-to-day basis. You can go in and set up tomorrow's schedule based on what you think now, based on what you have in the queue, you're going to do tomorrow. You're going to create one period for read behind and one period for scoring per day. You can, if you finish early, so you finish scoring early, you can go in and adjust that end time to basically close ScorePoint for you for the day. That's fine. You can do that. That's a great security measure. Just make sure that if you're going longer, you're extending that period before the end of that period comes. So if 12 o'clock comes and you forget to update your window so that it goes till 12:30, at 12 o'clock, a reader is going to be able to submit, but not get to the next one. Basically, is going to log them off. So you can extend the period, but you have to do it before that period actually ends. As scoring director, when we load new responses from Nextera into ScorePoint, you're going to get an email notification. It doesn't give you a lot of information. It just basically says, hey, we loaded some more responses into ScorePoint. Go check it out. We don't give you any numbers or where they're from or anything. But just as a heads up, you got more responses. You got more work to do, basically, is what the email is telling you. So as a scoring director, you're going to run that project setup report first. You're going to go in, you're going to set up your scoring windows and your read behind windows. The next step you need to do are request the logins. So under setup for a scoring director, you've managed your periods, you set up your scoring periods already. Now you're going to request New York logins. When you come to this page, in this box here, you're going to type in your school name. This is the school that is tied most closely to your readers. So you are at this point printing login tickets by school that your readers identify with. So I'm printing out login tickets for my readers from School A. I typed in School A. This box here actually will search all the schools. So when you type in your school name, be as specific as possible. If you just type in school, it's going to list all the schools that have school name in them. So be very specific in this row. Type in your school information. You'll see it in the drop down, choose it. This is the school that the readers are tied to. Same thing with team leaders. So it would be readers and or team leaders are tied to this school. You're going to identify how many logins you want for reader and team leader. So the good news is you can print reader logins and team leader logins at the same time. The bad news is you can only print 25 at a time. So for those of you who have large consortiums with many readers, you're going to have to be on this page for a little bit and you're going to print them 25 at a time. You're identifying you want these readers to be either group A or group B or group C. There's multiple. So once you print them or once you choose the number, you're going to request logins. And then the PDF is going to open for the logins. And you can print those. You can cut them up into the strips. You can put them on note cards, however you want to handle logins. For those of you who are administering math, And therefore, you will be scoring in ScorePoint for math. If you have any students who will be using an alternate language form for math, you also have to be prepared to score those alternate language forms for math. So when you request logins, all you're requesting are logins for any alt language. So that will be a choice here for math when you get there. You choose how many reader logins and how many team leader logins. When the reader logs in with that specific login that you've created for alt language, that's when the reader chooses what language, right? So depending on how you set up your alt language scores, maybe the reader is actually the person who's going to read the English and the other alt language, or maybe you have an interpreter there with the reader who's helping if there's anything in, Chinese or Korean. They're math, so there's probably not a lot, but you still have to have that process set up so you have someone who could read any alt language text that was put into those boxes, those CR boxes. So as the reader logs in, then he chooses the language. Today, I'm scoring Russian. I have my Russian interpreter with me. We're going to do any, math Russian responses. So they'll see it at that point. So that's how you print tickets for the alt language for math only. So again, this is what the login looks like. Once you print logins, now you have secure materials, and now you have to keep them under lock and key. So again, I want you to, as scoring director, I want you to run that project setup report as soon as possible and verify that your schools are correct. You can set up your testing windows as soon as you know your scoring plan. You can print logins when you need to, but don't print them out until you need to, because then you have to keep them secure. Once you print logins, you always have the ability to rerun or reprint those login tickets. As a scoring director, one of the reports that you can choose is this New York logins and initial password report. What you're doing is reprinting what you've already created. So the only logins that are going to show up on this report would be those logins you've already created under the Setup tab. So maybe as a scoring director, you want to keep track of the logins that you've created. Maybe you want to, on this separate report, you actually write down the readers' names that you've passed out logins for, right? So you can tie back to it. So it's just another way to get to the logins, but you're not going to see anything on this report until you actually initially generate those logins under the setup page. It's just another copy if you want to keep them for your records. We talked about releasing reservations as a reader, right? So on that home page for a reader, if for whatever reason they have a response that they haven't scored yet, it'll show up under that reserved responses. As a reader, it's their responsibility to clean that box up before they log out for the day. But we know that sometimes that doesn't always happen. So there is a way that scoring directors can see if any reserved responses are still in a reader's queue. This project incomplete report is a great report to run when you think you're almost done with scoring. You're running it just to verify. So it's going to give you some information, but it's going to give you the reserved responses. You're going to be able to see what is in the reserved responses and by who. Okay. Once you run this report and you see, yikes, Mary Reader was here and she had a couple of reserved responses and she didn't clean them out and she's not coming back now. Well, what do I do about that? As a scoring director, you can release reservations. So in ScorePoint, under performance scoring, one of your options is release reservations. You're going to filter the way you want to filter. And you can search based on this information. You can search by just a first name and last name. So you know you're looking for Mary Reader because she has left. She's not coming back. And I know, based on the report I just ran, there are some reserved responses in her queue. So you could just search by her. Then you click on the search button. It's going to pop up all those reserved responses for whatever you filtered. At that point, you can click on an individual response, or you can click up here in this box and click on release. That's going to release those responses, and they put them back in the regular queue, and then anyone can touch them. Anyone can pull them and score them. So you're basically releasing those back into the big bucket. So that's how you release reservations. Because remember, at the end, when you think you're done, you have to run the report to make sure that you actually do have all your responses scored before you can truly be done scoring. Okay, those are the tasks of a scoring director. I want to show you some other reports that we haven't talked about yet. There are many reports in ScorePoint. Some of them, like the project setup report that you will run and verify that your schools are tied to your consortia. There are other reports that are helpful to you, other reports that are helpful in planning for future years of scoring, and we're going to run through some of those now. So again, reports are available to a scoring director. Heather mentioned way back in the beginning that ScorePoint hasn't changed this year. So if you used it last year, the good news is you know how it works. We have made a couple of changes to some of the reports. We're going to go through those now, but for the most part, the report information is there. We've just changed how we sort of slice and dice the data. The project setup report, we have added the beds codes to the school names because in the state of New York, we have a lot of St. Mary's schools, just FYI, and it's really hard to determine which St. Mary's school you're talking about when there's no beds code. So we've added beds codes to this report. We also are now sorting by district school name and then by item identifier. So you'll see it that way. But again, this is the report that you are going to run and verify that all your schools are tied to your consortium. The project status report. Again, we've added school beds codes for this year to make it a little easier. And we've resorted it. We sort it now by item identifier and then by school name. So you'll see the item and then you'll see what schools you have in there. And it will show then by school E, you still have 2 responses that are not read. We also removed, there were some other headers that New York didn't use, so we removed those headers. But this is a great report to run daily during scoring. How am I doing? How many responses have I completed? Where am I in the big scheme of things? Okay. This is the report you're going to run when you think you're done and the scoring window is still open to verify that you are truly complete. Remember, You're not truly complete until the testing window has closed. So the testing window closes. The last day, we move all the responses into ScorePoint. And then you can run the project status report, right? See any stragglers. Oh, yay. School E had 2 kids finish on the last day of makeups. I got to get someone in here to read those. So run this report throughout your scoring window, but please make sure that you're running this report before you think you're done and you still have time to do something about it, right? So if you see a couple responses here, you got to be able to get someone in there and score the responses. The scoring window closes, you got to have, all zeros here in the not red column. The audit constructed response report, again, we've added school beds codes, and now we're sorting by school name. But this just gives you the number of responses by item and the number of students by grade. So it's just a nice sort of cleaner report that gives you sort of totals for scoring. Doesn't tell you if they've been scored, but it just gives you numbers of responses in ScorePoint. The project incomplete report, we've talked about this one. This one's a good one to read to make sure that you have any responses in the reserve queue, and then that will identify where you need to go and release them. Okay. So just another way of slicing the data to help you verify that you're ready to close. These 2 next reports, I think, are best when you print them and then you start talking about next year's scoring. Well, this year, if it's your first time scoring CBT and first time using ScorePoint, they say it cuts scoring in half, but what really happened in our consortia? How long did it really take us to score? These are great reports to run to say, okay, I see now how long it took us to score, grade 4 item 1. And you can see by reader how long it took them to score each response, right? What you can also see on the sort of the summary response is the average time. So in planning for next year, you have true data. So you can see exactly how long it took you to score each of the items. By reader, maybe you've got a slower reader, but how to plan for next year. I will tell you, when you run this report, one of the ways to run the status detail report is by reader. So when you choose the staff person and you choose that drop down, you'll see all of these numbers and these commas. Remember, when you print out login tickets for readers, they are not tied to a reader name. When they log in, they tie that to their own name. But until someone uses that login that you've created, all you see is this comma. So unfortunately, the way we sort for this report, for this dropdown, is all the commas come first, which are logins that haven't been used. If you scroll down on this dropdown, you'll start then seeing your reader names, and you can choose if you want to run it by a specific staff person reader name. You'll see those afterwards. So when you're using this report and you want to maybe just run it to see how Mary Reader did, you scroll down past all these commas and you'll see your readers. So just FYI, if you're looking for a specific reader, they're at the bottom. They're past all the commas. And we talked about this report. The item score report, again, this is just another way of slicing and dicing the data. So it has the response ID, it's got the reader information, it's got the score that the reader gave for this item, okay, and then reading times. So just another report with a lot of information, good for planning for next year, good for seeing how things are going, what readers are maybe taking a little bit longer than others. ScorePoint distribution report, this is just for this reader, how they've been doing. So how, based on what they've read, so this sample is just they've read one response, but where their distribution falls. So as a reader, you know, if you've read 500 responses, where have you been falling? Where's your distribution of scores? And this will run for all the readers. This slide here is just a sort of quick look on who has what access in ScorePoint. So as a team leader, what can I do? As a reader, what can I do? So just a quick place to look to remind you, wait, can a team leader do this? Do they have access to it? This is sort of that quick look. All right. So how to finish the scoring project? Well, as scoring director, you're going to use the reports that are in ScorePoint to verify that all responses have been scored, all the read behinds are complete. You can run the reports, and there are some samples here, the project setup, the status. Run those, make sure that you have all the response scored. You're not fully done with scoring until the testing window is closed and you've verified that all your responses are scored. You're also looking and verifying that your alerts have been worked and closed. So again, you can do that from ScorePoint. You can check their status, but you're also working with principals and teachers and whoever needs to get involved to handle those alerts. If you realize that you still have some responses that you need to score, you may need to open up a scoring window, right? Maybe open it up for a couple hours, get some readers in there, get a team leader to do some read behinds and finish up. And you would do that from the setup menu in ScorePoint. There is no finish button in ScorePoint. Once you verify that all your responses have been scored, all your alerts are cleaned up, you're good. You're done. Run all the reports that you want. If you want to keep them for next year's planning, you can do that. And then you're done. This is our contact information. We will tell you if you have any questions about scoring policies. You need to call the Office of State Assessment. Questar cannot answer those. But we can answer any of your questions about how to use ScorePoint. So I need a scoring director reset on the password, call us. I can't remember what you said about setting up windows, then you call us. We also, during the scoring window, we actually have a specific scoring helpline that will help you with any questions about actually scoring. So based on the sample from the math scoring materials, it just helped me understand why this was a 2 and not a 3. So we have that scoring helpline. That phone number is here. So there's a couple of different phone numbers you can use here for any questions that you have. Send us an email. We'll help you get through it. With that, we've come to the end of our slides. So Heather, do you have any open questions that you want to discuss with the group?
Eileen, we do not. We got one question throughout the whole thing. So Do you want to ask if there are any folks who have questions?
Sure.
They want to ask us,
Yeah.
see if there's anybody to hold up hand?
If anyone has a question, the little hand icon next to your name under attendees, if you hold up your hand, we'll open up your mic. So be prepared. We're going to open up your mic and you can ask the question directly. So let's see. Kristen Freeman, did you have a question?
Hi, Kristen. Hi, Kristen. What can we help you with?
That's not working. Kristen, are you there? Okay. Well, let's see. Emily Graham.
Hi, it's Suzanne Pettifer actually, and I'm just wondering how many read behinds should we expect our team leaders to do behind each of our readers?
So the read behind process is a local decision. NICEAD doesn't give specifics. I think there's some recommendations in the scoring leader handbook, but they don't give out, there isn't a policy on how many to do.
Okay. Yeah. So in the past, we've done about 1 an hour, and that seems like not enough right now because when you're scoring in ScorePoint, it goes so much faster. So I was just wondering if there was.
Yeah, I would absolutely adjust that because, it's easier. You don't have to decipher the student's handwriting.
Right.
It's just a simpler process. Why not add more careful, review if it's easier? I agree with that.
Okay. I was thinking of doing like 4, and I'm thinking with how I have it grouped, I think that makes more sense just because it seemed like you did 2 and then all of a sudden everybody was done scoring all the papers and I was like, oh, well, I think we probably could have done some more. So, okay.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Good. All right. Danielle Hans, you have a question?
Hello, Danielle. Danielle, you can ask us a question, yeah?
All right.
Okay.
Let's see.
Anyone else, please? You might be on mute, Danielle, but okay.
Nope, that's everyone. That's everyone.
All right. Well, thanks so much. We hope everyone has a great CBT scoring season ahead of us for ELA and math. And again, when you have positive feedback for it, we know that it does cut scoring time in half and that you have happier scorers. Just share it with us. We like to hear that, okay? Thank you.